and welcome to the Gothic Unicorn. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit seasonal. This is a piece that could be used as a springtime decoration, or it could be used for Easter. It's not quite as spooky as some of my other pieces, but I'm sure that with a little bit of thought it could be spooked up. Now, those of you who are regulars on my channel are probably thinking, okay, springtime, Easter, she's going to get the eggs out again. And whilst it's true that I have used the polystyrene or styrofoam eggs for lots of different things, I've used them for Halloween, I use them for Christmas, I'm not about to use them for Easter. That would be just too predictable. Actually, I was considering doing something with them, but I found something else, and that's what we're going to be working on today. Now, I picked these little rabbits up from the range in the UK. They are made of polystyrene, styrofoam, and I thought, they look like they could be used for a topiary. As you might have gathered, I quite like using topiary for external doll's house decoration. They don't take up a lot of room to store, and they can be changed out with the seasons. And what I have seen quite often in shops for spring stroke Easter are these rabbit shapes that are covered in like a green faux grass, for want of a better description. They're not actually supposed to look like they're a real plant. They are just fake, but they're done in green, and you know, they make a reasonable kind of decor piece. So I've decided I'm going to try and make my own version using one of these. So let's get on with it. I want to start by actually covering the rabbit in scatter. Now, this is my pot of scatter that I used when I did my 1/48 scale house base. It's a material that's used by model makers, railway enthusiasts, and more so smaller scale doll's house makers to replicate grass. It gives a nice bit of texture, and it's fairly easy, if a little messy, to work with. So what I'm going to do is I am going to cover my rabbit with that. But before I do that, I want to make a hole for a supporting stick. This could be a stem, or it's going to replicate a stem, and I'm going to use a cocktail stick. I'm not, however, going to try and dig straight into the underneath of my bunny with a cocktail stick. I'm going to make a little hole with my metal paper piercer first, just because it will make life a bit easier, and then I can put this in and I can make the hole to fit. So then you can see I'm going to have something like this. I will be cutting the cocktail stick down. I will be taking the point off the one end before I glue that in and trimming that down so that it fits better into whatever kind of a container I go for. But it just gives me the hole, which gives me something to avoid when I'm covering the rabbit in scatter. The application of the scatter is going well. It is not easy, it is messy, and if you actually know me in real life, you'll know that this is the most unlikely thing for me to do. I've done all kinds of crafting, but I despise anything that is like this. Glitter, embossing powder, I don't get on with it. but I'm doing it because it does give a good effect. Now I'm actually using the cocktail stick stem at the moment just because it is making my life easier. And what I'm doing is I'm applying the scatter using just PVA glue. Now I'm using the PVA because I've seen it recommended on various sites, and it does of course have different properties to my usual acrylic glue. And all I'm doing is I am covering the bunny with glue, and I'm getting a good, fairly thick coverage around the eye and everywhere else. And then it is just a case of, once you think you've got enough on a particular area, we get this and we coat it like you might coat something with breadcrumbs, but obviously if you were breading something for cooking, you'd generally be dipping it in. I'm not dipping it in because I don't want to ruin the rest of my scatter. So we do that, then we give it a bit of a shake off, and we move on to the next section. As you can see, I haven't got much more to do, and I'm going to get that done, and then I will leave it to dry before I do the sealing stage. Sealing is very important, just stops it all rubbing off afterwards. Once the glue that I used to apply the scatter had dried, and that took somewhere in the region of about an hour to be sure that it was at least pretty well set, I applied the sealer. Now the sealer, which I've got in here, is just watered down PVA. When you're making dioramas and things like that, they tell you to mix it in a spray bottle with a drop of dish detergent, washing up liquid, just to break down the surface tension of the water. I haven't bothered to do that because I've not got that much to do, so I've just dabbed it on with a brush. And so far this has probably had about 30 minutes drying, and it is still quite wet. The big thing with making stuff like this is giving yourself sufficient drying time. It is not something that is going to be done in 5 minutes. Some of my projects can indeed be finished quite quickly, but you've always got to allow for drying time. It is the big killer when it comes to any of these things. Paint, glue, it all takes time to go off and to cure. So I'm going to be putting him aside for probably a good couple of hours longer, if not overnight, before I actually do anything with him. I've actually got him on a little piece of foam at the moment on his cocktail stick, and I've just put some paper towel in between so that should he drip, because I'm having him that way up, and gravity does have a habit of sometimes dripping, this catches it and it doesn't go all over my desk. But this is quite normal. It's going to take a while to dry. You've just got to go with the flow. So what I've been doing while this one has been drying is I've been making a variation, which I'll show you in a while. And while I continue to wait for him to dry, I'm going to move on to making the pot that he's going to be sitting in. So that's my next step, is a little bit of a container making spree. As I say, I've got another one as well as him, so I've got to make 2 containers, so we'll get on with that. I am making the planter, for want of a better word, in a similar way to how I've made them in the past. I'm using some offcuts of foam board, and I've got 4 pieces here that are 1.5 inches wide the one way and a bit under the other. The slightly smaller measurement is because that was how wide my offcut was. And what I've done is I've cut 4 to make a pot. Now I think when I made these before, I made an actual pot and, you know, built the sides and everything, but I'm just going for the easy option this time, and I'm just going to stick these together, put some glue on each one, and make myself a pile. This isn't, you know, a really fancy way of making a planter. It's just a means to an end, really. I don't need it to be fantastic and perfect, because I'm thinking of this as being some kind of seasonal decor piece, which will be out for a few weeks or so. So I'm going to put let those sort of dry for a moment, and I will glue the final one in place. Because I've got actually 2 rabbits, I have already prepared another one. Now this one I ran out of my offcut. It wasn't quite enough, and so I've used 2 pieces that were thinner and stuck them together and stuck them to the other pieces and trimmed it off, and it'll work for what I want. So I'm going to finish gluing this and then we'll be back with the next stage. Because I'm going for a similar look across the planters that I've made for various seasonal display pieces, I am going with the Das clay. This is a air dry clay, it's paper clay, and I've seen people do some wonderful things with this. I'm not quite there yet, but it does for what I want. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a lump off and put the rest aside for the moment. I'm going to need more than this, but I don't like getting too much out at a time, because it does start to dry out. And I'm just going to work it a bit to try and I think the proper term, if you're using real clay or polymer clay, is condition it. I think this bit's going a bit dry, but it'll do for what I want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start making pieces to go on the outside of my planter. I don't want it very thick. I don't need it very thick. I'm just picking something up off there, but Lord only knows, probably tea. But what I'm going to do is I will start off with this, and I will be building a planter around my yes, what's it called? Around my foam board. Now I'm going to cut it off at the bottom, because I'm not going to make a bottom on it, and I will tidy it up at the top. If I get some water and get wet fingers, I can smooth it out quite nicely. But I'm going to do that off camera, simply because I don't like messing with the camera with really dirty fingers, and they're going to get really dirty. I am back on the waiting for things to dry game. I've got the clay on both of my planters, and then I used the bits that I got left to make a few little bits that you may or may not see again in the future. I just haven't bothered to move anything off the tile that I've put things on to dry. So I'm going to put this aside, and I am going to have a look instead and see if my bunny is ready to do something with. Now, I actually think that Bunny is pretty much dry. Now I'm going to take him out of there and remove the dirty paper towel. And I think this is mostly dry. Now, there's a few places where I could possibly do with going and giving him a bit of a second coat, but I'm quite pleased with how it's looking. I'll put him back in the piece of foam so that he doesn't fall over. And I'm going to be looking at how I'm going to decorate him. Now, I'm not going to leave it as is. I'll put this down so he's not green on green. I am looking to give him a little bit of a zhuzhing up. So I think I've got an idea where this is going to go, but I'm just trying to decide if I want to add any more, and I don't know if I do or not. I may regret it, but what I'm actually thinking of doing is I'm thinking of using a flower instead of his eye. I've got a little indentation where his eye should have been, and what I'm thinking of is putting a flower, it's a little punched flower, into its eye socket, and then giving it a little centre so it looks a bit more whimsical. I think that's what I'm going to go with. I am going to go looking for the tools I need, because I thought I got one on my desk and I haven't. And I'm going to look at putting a bit of shape into this flower, and then we can maybe stack them up to make it a bit more bulky, give it a nice centre and stick it into place. Now, to give the flowers a bit of shape, I'm using a ball tool. This is actually one that's meant for nail art because I can't find my proper craft ones. And all that you do is you put it onto something soft. I'm using an eraser, and you just run it around in the middle. And what it does is it makes a cup into the middle of the flower, and it gives the flower a little bit of shape. And you can do this on an old-fashioned mouse mat, or even a piece of craft foam if you haven't got anything else. It's quite a simple little technique, but what it does is it gives you a flower that looks a bit more realistic. Now, these are just punched flowers that I did out of copier paper. That I coloured the copier paper before I punched the flowers. They would be coloured with alcohol inks because my alcohol inks go through the copier paper. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to glue them offset. So I've put a little bit of glue in the bottom of the first one, and then I'm going to slide the other one into position. I was trying to do it there with my tweezers, but they didn't want to play. And what that just does is I just want to position them together so that instead of having the quite obvious 5 petal arrangement, I get a more solid flower. And then I'm going to repeat it with this one, and I'm going to try and get it a bit more lined up with the tweezers. And of course I haven't managed it, because why would I manage it? Because I'm on camera. What I can then do is, if I allow the glue to dry a little bit, I can give it a little bit more of a workaround with the ball tool. Once the glue is set on the flowers, I can apply them to the eyes of the bunny. Now I've got an indentation in the bunny, which is like the eye socket. And what I'm doing is I'm just putting some glue into that sort of indentation, and then I'm going to put the little flower on the top. And what I want to do is, using my ball tool again, I just want to push the eye so that it's actually well and truly stuck into place. Now I've already done the other side, so it's got 2 flowers for eyes. And now what we need to do is we need to add a centre to the flower. Now I'm going to use some Stickles glitter glue for this because it is a really nice orange colour and it's just what I fancied using. Now I'm going to put some of this out onto my little bit of cardboard that I use for glue, because I don't want it blobbing all over the bunny. And I'm going to use my cocktail stick again, and I'm going to remove some, I think. I don't want too much at once. I'm going to put what I think looks like a reasonable amount into the centre of the flower. What I find with the Stickles is that sometimes you're actually better off putting some on, letting it dry, and then adding some more. So I've put out a lot there, and I just need a fraction of that, realistically. Just enough to give Mr. Bunny a bit of colour. So let's wipe that off my cocktail stick in case I pick it up and forget. And we've got the basics of our topiary. Again, this needs to be allowed to dry, so I'm going to put it aside and probably leave the bunny for a while and come back once some more drying's been done, and we can hopefully finish this all off. I'm going to finish off decorating the bunny with a bit of a collar. Now I'm just using some ribbon for this. This was the only orange ribbon I could find, and what I've done is I have doubled it over and glued it down because it was organza and there was no way it was going to stand for being cut in half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the end a little bit, and I'm going to put a bit of glue on the rabbit's neck. Put it about there. And I'm going to put my ribbon into place. Now, the idea is that I'm going to wrap it all the way around. Now, obviously, I need to get this to stick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my paper piercer, just because it's nice and handy, and I'm going to push this into place. Unfortunately, because this is organza, it's being a bit of a pain. Plus my glue is pretty much fresh out of the bottle, so it's not exactly tacky, it's still quite runny. So I'm going to glue that in place on there, and then I'm just going to wrap it around the back of the neck. Now I'm going to try and do this on camera. I am trying to do more on camera, I'm just not particularly great at getting things that are so small in shot and not my fingers. So as you can see, put this round and it will overlap a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my scissors and trim that off. Grab another good blob of glue and put it on the end of the ribbon. And then I'm going to pop these in place. Like so. Now I'm going to ignore the fact that somebody has just texted me, and I'm going to let this dry, and then we will see about fitting Bunny to its pot. Now I did actually do a lot of this on camera and I've had a problem with my footage, so I'm going to just have to explain what I've done. I have glued the little rabbit onto its stick, its stalk if you like. If it was topiary it would be a stalk or a stem. I painted my pots with a combination of dark grey, light grey and sage green. This is a technique that I like for doing a sort of fairly natural stone effect. I think the green just gives it a bit of depth that just doing grey wouldn't. And then I painted the top of the foam board with some brown paint. Now I could have used black. I was just trying to cover up all the marks that I'd made putting the clay around it, and it just means that I've got a nice even base coat for my soil. My soil, which I've glued on in pretty much the same way as I did the flock, is tea. I use tea leaves. Some of them are tea leaves that have been brewed and then dried. Some are the tea leaves that you get when you get a ripped bag in your box. I save them, I use them as soil. It works. Glue, tea leaves, and then once that's dried I put over some Mod Podge. The Mod Podge is still wet on here, which is why it's white. It will dry. I will be waiting to film the end of this until it's actually dried off a bit better, but you do at least get the idea. And then the last step is just to glue the stalk, the cocktail stick, into the pot so that the topiary has got somewhere to sit. If you didn't just want soil underneath it, you could put some moss, you could put some more flowers, you know, to make it more spring-like. But I'm happy with this as it sits. I may surround it with some little flower pots yet when I put it on my doll's house, although it is actually a little bit tame for my doll's house. So it remains to be seen whether it will make it there or whether it'll just be decorating my craft space for a time. I have made reference a couple of times to the fact that I've done a second version. Now I've used a product called Flower Soft. Now this is my pot of it. I've actually got it in a little container because there's no way you could use it out of the pot. I've used quite a bit of it on a few projects now, and I've still got a good half a pot plus some more in my little container. Now Flower Soft was originally done for miniatures. I can remember seeing it at miniature shows many moons ago, and then it got taken up for more general craft purposes. Now I don't know if it's still made, but it is a sort of textured flocking material that originally, as the name suggests, was designed for doing flowers. But I bought this one for making snow. And I remembered I got it and I thought, oh, I wonder if I can use that on a rabbit. And that is what I've done. My second rabbit is done with Flower Soft. Now, unfortunately, it has taken on a bit of a green tinge in places. That is my own fault. I had managed to get some of it that was in the tub corrupted and it has got everywhere. But I don't care because I actually think it makes it look a little bit worn. Maybe like it's got a little bit of moss or something growing over it. I've actually completed this in exactly the same way as the green version. I just used the white Flower Soft. And then to give it a slightly spookier look, I've gone with the black flowers for the eyes with a little red centre. And I also added a red ribbon to this one, just because it seemed to be more apt. Now, if you want to go even spookier than I have, and I've got to say, this one reminds me of a certain rabbit from a certain Monty Python film. And as someone who actually owned a white rabbit at the time when I saw that film, it's always stuck with me. But if you wanted to make it more scary, and I will just get a blank one here. I've got more. There were 6 in the pack. I've only used 2. I don't know what I'm going to do with the other 4, but you know, you never know. What you could do is you could cut a mouth out of it. It's quite easy to cut pieces out of this with a craft knife. I did it with eggs when I made my man-eating plant. And then you could put teeth into it, which would give it a really scary look. Obviously, you wouldn't want a flock inside the mouth, you'd want to paint inside the mouth. And I'd actually recommend painting inside the mouth before you did the flocking. Maybe even sticking the teeth in as well. It's just a thought that I had that you could make it more scary. As it is, I quite like the sort of idea of this white one with its red eyes. So this is another one that needs the Mod Podge to dry completely because I've done the pot in exactly the same way. Nothing remarkable there. You could put it in any shape pot you wanted. You could use a plastic container like I did to make my Valentine's topiary, to make a round pot, but I quite like these sort of rectangular stone containers. I've done a few of them now and I like changing things around with them. And here we have my 2 Easter spring bunnies. A rabbit being obviously the Easter bunny, but it's also a symbol that is well established as being a springtime symbol. I like how these have come out. I am quite pleased with how the scatter worked, although if I was going to do it again I would paint underneath because there are bits that show through. I don't mind because that's just how, you know, I am. But if you want a more even look, even just a coat of black paint will just disguise that. They're a really easy little make. I mean, obviously you need to be able to get hold of suitably sized bunnies, but if you can, this is a great way to make a seasonal decoration for your doll's house stroke miniature scene. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please like, comment and subscribe, and until next time, bye.